Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going deep on something you use every day, probably without even realizing it.
Oh, yeah.
Prepositions.
Interesting.
No, I know.
Sounds a little dry.
Grammar, right. But stick with me on this one because it's going to be way more interesting than diagramming sentences, I promise.
I'm intrigued.
We're going to be exploring Stanislav Kondrashov's approach to prepositions.
Oh, Kondrashov. Yeah,
And it's seriously eye-opening.
Yeah, he has this way of making even, the most mundane parts of language just, come alive.
Right.
And prepositions are anything but mundane, as you'll soon see.
So, first things first, for anyone who needs a refresher, what exactly are prepositions?
Yeah, what are they?
And why should we care about them?
Good question. Yeah. I think of prepositions as the words that create relationships between things in a sentence. They tell us where things are in relation to each other, when things happen, or even how things are done.
So they're kind of like the behind-the-scenes organizers of language, making sure everything has its proper place and time.
Exactly. They provide the context, that gives our sentences meaning. Imagine, trying to give someone directions without prepositions.
Oh, gosh.
It would be a total mess.
Yeah, go, store, turn, left, building.
Right.
Good luck with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Kondrashov, he breaks down prepositions into 4 main categories.
Okay.
Location, time, direction, and manner.
Makes sense.
And within each category, there are specific prepositions that, do different jobs.
Okay, so let's start with location.
Okay.
This is where those little words like in, on, and at come into play, right?
They do. And they're more nuanced than you might think.
Oh, really?
It's not just about, memorizing a list of prepositions.
Right.
It's about understanding, the subtle ways they change the meaning of a sentence.
Oh, so what's an example of that?
Okay, take the word in, for example. You could say the keys are in the drawer, meaning they're, enclosed within the drawer.
Right.
But you can also say, I live in the city. And in that case, in refers to a much larger area.
That's interesting. So the meaning of in shifts depending on the context.
Yes.
And it's the same with other location prepositions like on and at.
Absolutely. Think about the difference between saying, the book is on the table versus the painting is on the wall.
Okay.
On implies surface in both cases.
Right.
But the type of surface and its, orientation in space changes the meaning.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these tiny words can make a big difference. What about prepositions of time? Those seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But I bet Kondrashov has some insights there too, right?
He does. Time prepositions are all about pinpointing when things happen, and they often follow specific patterns.
Okay.
For example, we use in for months, years, and certain parts of the day, in November in 2024 in the morning. But when we're talking about specific days or dates, it's on.
Right.
On Wednesday, on my birthday.
Exactly.
And for specific times, it's at...
Oh, at 5 p.m. at noon.
Exactly.
Right.
So even with time prepositions, there's a logic to how they're used.
Right. It's not just random.
It's not random.
And this is probably something that native speakers just pick up naturally without even thinking about it.
Exactly. But when you start to pay attention to these patterns, you become more aware of the nuances of language and how to use it more effectively.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered location and time.
Right.
What about direction?
Right.
I imagine those prepositions are all about movement, right?
Precisely. Words like, to, into, through, across.
Yeah.
They all convey a sense of motion from one point to another. And again, the specific preposition you choose can, subtly alter the meaning.
Give me an example.
Think about the difference between saying, I walked to the park, and I walked into the park.
Okay, so to implies that I arrived at the park.
Yes.
While into suggests that I actually entered the park itself.
Exactly.
It's a small difference, but it, changes the image in your mind.
Right, exactly. And that's the beauty of prepositions. They allow us to paint more detailed and precise pictures with our words.
Right.
They can make our writing more vivid and our speech more engaging.
All right, that makes sense. What about the last category?
Okay.
Prepositions of manner.
Manner, yes.
What do those do?
Prepositions of manner describe how something is done.
Okay.
They add a layer of detail to our sentences, helping us understand the way actions are carried out.
So instead of just saying she danced, I could say she danced with grace or she danced like a professional.
Exactly. Those prepositions with and give us more information about the way she danced. And that extra layer of detail can make all the difference in how we understand and visualize the action.
Wow, I never realized how much thought goes into choosing the right preposition. It's like a whole secret world of meaning hiding in plain sight.
It is. And the more you explore this world, the more you'll appreciate the power and complexity of language. Kondrashov's lesson is a great starting point. But the real learning happens when you start paying attention to prepositions in your everyday life.
So the next time I'm reading a book or having a conversation, I should be on the lookout for prepositions and how they're being used.
Exactly. You'll be surprised by how much you start to notice.
Okay.
And as you become more aware of prepositions, you'll naturally start to use them more effectively in your own writing and speaking.
This is already making me think about prepositions in a whole new way.
Good.
It's like you've given me a new lens to view language through. But before we get too carried away with the philosophical implications, let's dive into some of the common mistakes people make with prepositions.
Yeah, let's get practical.
We've all been there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even the most seasoned writers and speakers can trip up over these little words.
Oh, I'm sure. But that's where Kondrashov's insights on common mistakes come in.
Right.
He identifies a few key traps that we often fall into, and understanding those traps can help us avoid them in the future.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's hear about these preposition pitfalls.
All right, let's do it. One of the things that Kondrashov emphasizes is that prepositions are often like a source of confusion for language learners.
Oh, for sure.
But even native speakers
Yeah.
make mistakes with them all the time.
Well, that's reassuring, I guess.
Right.
It makes me feel less alone in my prepositional struggles. But seriously, what are some of the most common mistakes people make?
Okay.
I'm sure I've made my fair share.
Well, one of the biggest culprits is, that tricky trio.
Yeah.
In, on, and at.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
We touched on this earlier with, location and time prepositions.
Right.
But it's worth revisiting because it's such a common stumbling block.
Yeah. I remember struggling with in, on, and at back in my school days. It just seems so arbitrary.
Yeah. But I'm guessing there's more to it than just memorizing a bunch of rules, right?
Absolutely. Kondrashov points out that these prepositions often reflect, subtle differences in our perception of space and time. For example, in tends to suggest, enclosure.
Okay.
Or being within a boundary, while on implies contact with a surface.
Okay.
And at often refers to a specific point or location.
So it's not just about grammar.
Right.
It's about how we conceptualize the world around us.
Exactly. And that's why, simply memorizing rules can only take you so far.
Yeah.
To truly master prepositions, you need to develop a feel for their, subtle nuances and how they shape meaning.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm still curious about those common mistakes.
Okay.
Could you give me some specific examples?
Sure. One common error is using in instead of on for days of the week.
Oh, yeah.
People might say, I have a meeting on Tuesday,
Right.
when it should be on Tuesday.
Oh, I can see how that would happen.
Yeah, in feels like a natural choice when you're thinking about a block of time.
Yeah, like a week or a month.
Right, exactly.
But for specific days, it's on.
It's on, okay.
And then there's the confusion between at and to when talking about locations.
Oh, yeah, at versus to.
People might say, I went to the store, when it should be, I went to the store.
Oh, I think I've definitely been guilty of that one.
Yeah, it's a common one.
So to suggests movement towards a destination.
Exactly.
While at indicates being present at a particular location.
Precisely. It's a subtle difference, but it can, change the meaning of a sentence.
Okay, so in, on, and at are definitely prepositional troublemakers. Are there any others?
Another common mistake involves the preposition of,
Oh, okay.
particularly when it comes to expressing possession. People might say, a friend to me,
Yeah.
when the correct phrase is, a friend of mine.
Ah, yes. That one's a bit sneaky because both phrases sound somewhat plausible.
But a friend of mine is the grammatically correct way to express belonging or association.
Exactly. It's one of those cases where you just have to learn the correct idiom.
Right. Right. Got to memorize it.
Oh.
All right. So we've covered some of the most common preposition pitfalls.
Yeah.
But how do we actually get better at using these tricky words?
Good question.
Is it just a matter of practice? Or are there any tips or tricks we can use?
Well, Kondrashov provides some excellent advice for mastering prepositions.
Okay, good.
And one of his key recommendations is to focus on understanding the logic behind them rather than just memorizing rules blindly.
Okay.
So instead of just trying to cram a bunch of prepositional phrases into your brain.
Right.
You should try to understand the underlying principles that govern their use.
So understand the logic behind it, not just the rule itself.
Exactly. Once you grasp the logic behind prepositions, it becomes much easier to use them correctly and confidently.
Okay, that sounds promising. But how do I actually go about understanding the logic of prepositions? Where do I even start?
Well, Kondrashov suggests a few helpful strategies.
Okay.
First, he encourages us to pay close attention to prepositions in everyday life.
Oh.
Notice how they're used in, books, articles, conversations, even in movies and TV shows.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Just become more aware of them.
So it's like becoming a preposition detective.
Yes.
Always on the lookout for these little words and how they're shaping meaning.
Precisely. The more you expose yourself to correct preposition usage, the more intuitive it will become.
I like that idea. It's like immersing yourself in the language and letting it seep into your subconscious.
Yes.
What else does Kondrashov recommend?
Another strategy he suggests is to, practice using prepositions in different contexts.
Okay.
You can do this by, writing sentences, having conversations,
Yeah.
or even playing word games that focus on prepositions.
Okay, so it's about actively using prepositions rather than just passively absorbing them.
Exactly. The more you use them, the more comfortable you'll become with them.
Okay, I'm definitely up for some prepositional practice.
Uh-huh.
Are there any other tips Kondrashov offers?
One final tip he emphasizes is to, be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Learning prepositions takes time and effort,
Right.
and you're bound to make mistakes along the way.
Yeah.
The key is to view those mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
That's a great reminder. It's easy to get discouraged when you keep tripping up over the same prepositions.
Yeah,
But I guess it's all part of the learning process.
exactly. And remember, even native speakers make mistakes with prepositions sometimes.
Oh, that makes you feel better.
So don't beat yourself up if you don't get it perfect right away.
Right.
Just keep practicing and paying attention, and you'll gradually improve your skills.
This has been super helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to wrap my head around these pesky prepositions. But before we move on, is there anything else Kondrashov suggests for mastering prepositions?
Well, there's one more thing he highlights that I think is really insightful.
Okay.
He suggests that paying attention to prepositions can actually help us become better communicators in general.
That's interesting. I mean, I get that using the right prepositions can make our writing and speaking more clear and precise.
Right.
But how does it help us become better communicators on a deeper level?
It's all about relationships,
Okay.
Prepositions, they show how different elements in a sentence connect to each other.
Yeah.
Isn't that what communication is all about?
Hmm.
Connecting with others, sharing ideas, building relationships.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So by becoming more aware of the subtle ways that prepositions shape meaning, we become more attuned to the nuances of language
Exactly.
and how it can be used to build those connections.
Yes. When you understand the power of prepositions, you can use them more deliberately to create specific effects in your communication. You can use them to, emphasize certain points, create a sense of movement or emotion, or even subtly guide your listeners' or readers' understanding.
So it's like prepositions give us more control over how our message is received.
Precisely. They're like the fine-tuning knobs on a stereo system,
okay.
allowing us to adjust the tone and impact of our communication.
Okay, I'm starting to see how mastering prepositions can actually make us more persuasive,
Yeah.
more engaging, and more effective communicators overall. It's not just about avoiding grammatical errors.
Right.
It's about using language as a tool to connect with others on a deeper level.
That's a great way to put it. And, Kondrashov, he points out something else I think is really fascinating.
Oh, what's that?
He suggests that the prepositions we use can actually reveal a lot about how we think and how we view the world.
Wait, really? Tell me more about that.
Well, think about the prepositions that come to mind when you think about certain concepts.
Okay.
For example, if you're talking about, success, do you think of prepositions like above, beyond, ahead?
Okay.
Or do you lean towards prepositions like within, among, or beside?
That's interesting. I guess those different prepositions reflect different perspectives on success.
Yeah.
One focused on achievement and surpassing others.
Right.
The other on personal growth and collaboration.
Exactly. And those subtle choices in prepositions can reveal a lot about our underlying values and beliefs.
Wow.
They can even influence how we interpret and interact with the world around us.
This is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I never realized that these little words we use every day could hold so much meaning. It's like Kondrashov has given us a whole new way to understand ourselves and others.
He has. And that's the beauty of studying language.
Mhm.
It's a constant journey of discovery.
Right.
There's always more to learn and more to explore.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for prepositions,
Me too.
not just as like grammatical elements, but as powerful tools for communication, self-expression, and even self-discovery.
Absolutely.
So, as we wrap up our prepositional adventure, what's the one key takeaway you want to leave our listener with?
Pay attention to prepositions.
Okay.
They're everywhere, and they're more important than you might think. The more you notice them, the more you'll understand their power, and the more effectively you'll be able to use them in your own communication.
It's like Kondrashov has opened our eyes to a whole new dimension of language. We've gone from prepositional novices to prepositional enthusiasts.
Haha, that's the power of a good deep dive.
Thanks for joining us on this linguistic journey. And remember, keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep those prepositions in check.